morning, boys and girls. Today is Thursday, November 5th, and we are wrapping up our five senses unit. So it's perfect timing because I have two jars here that the labels fell off of, and I don't remember which is in which jar. So one is going to be sugar and one is going to be salt, but I forget which is which. So you're going to help me out. Your teachers emailed your parents ahead of time letting them know we had this problem. So you should have in front of you a little bit of sugar and a little bit of salt. Now, I don't know if you know which one is which. If you do, that's okay. If not, you're gonna work with me and figure it out, okay? We're gonna do that by using our what? Five senses, okay? Let's just review our five senses really quick. So what's one of them? Sight. Smell, right? We use our nose for smelling. Our sense of hearing, we use our ears. Our sense of touch, we use our hands. And our sense of taste, we use our mouth and our tongue. Okay? Now the thing about our sense of taste is your tongue has taste buds. And your taste buds tell you if something is sweet or salty or bitter or sour. Okay? So there's certain spots on your tongue that let you know how a food tastes. All right, so let's start with our sense of sight. So what do you notice about each jar? So let's talk about jar number one first. What do we notice? And parents, you can pause the video if you want to give your children a chance to answer the question, and you can write it down on paper. You can make a chart like me. You're free to do that. Whatever works for you at home, okay? So, I notice that jar number one is white and powdery, kind of like a powder, okay? So I'm gonna write it's white. It's powdery. Okay. The grains, if I look at it closely, you can look at yours closely, they're very small. So I'm going to put small grains. Okay, now let's move on to jar number two. What do you notice about my jar number two? Or about your container number two at home? Okay, so I notice that this one is also white. So I'm gonna write it's white. Okay. It's also kind of powdery, right? It looks a little bit like snow. And mine, yours might not have this at home, but mine has clumps. You see those clumps there? They look like snowballs. So I'm gonna write it's clumpy, right? That's a good descriptive word, clumpy. And it also has small grains. I'm gonna write small grains. Okay. Now, what did we learn about these two items by using our sense, using our sense of sight? We learned that they look what? The same, right? So they look the same. Okay. Now we're going to do our sense of smell. Okay? So I want you to take your container, jar number one, and smell it. Using your nose, right? Your sense of smell. We're going to sniff to see if it has a scent. Does your jar number one have a scent? Mine doesn't. So I'm going to write no scent. Okay, I'm gonna close it back up. And now I'm gonna smell my jar number 2. And so are you at home. So let's smell it. Do you notice anything? Let's smell it. It smells sweet to me. Maybe like cookies or cake, right? So I'm gonna write smells like cake. And I'm gonna write sweet. So what did we learn by using our sense of smell? So we learned that jar number 2 has a scent, right? So jar 2 has a scent. Okay. Now we're going to use our sense of hearing. Hold it up to your ear. Do you hear anything? Jar number 1. And what about jar number 2? No, I don't hear anything. I wonder if there's something we could do to make a sound. Maybe we can try shaking it. Does it make a sound when you shake it? It does. I don't know if you'll be able to hear, but it does. It makes a sound when you shake it. So I'm gonna put for jar number 1, makes a sound when I shake it. Okay, and let's try number 2. Same thing, makes a sound when I shake it. So I'm gonna write that again. Makes a sound when I shake it. Okay, so what did we learn about jar number 1 and jar number 2? That they both make a sound when shaken. So both make a sound. Okay. Now we're going to use our 4th sense, our sense of touch. Okay? So let's start with jar number 1. And I'm going to pour a little bit into my hand. Just a tiny bit so I can put it between my fingers and see how it feels. Okay, so see, I only put a tiny bit. And I'm gonna feel it. I'm gonna put it between my fingers and I'm gonna go like this. It feels a little coarse, right? If I rub it in my palm like this, it feels a little bit coarse and rough. So I'm gonna write, it feels coarse. You might say bumpy. That's a word you might use. Okay. Now I'm going to, and you at home are also going to feel jar number 2. So you're gonna open up jar number 2, and we're gonna take out a little bit. Okay. See, got a little bit in my hand. And I want you to do the same thing with what was in jar number 2. Okay. Gonna feel it. This one also feels a little bit coarse, right? But it's doing something also. What is it doing? It's sticking to my finger. So it's a little bit sticky, right? So I'm gonna write feels coarse, right? Or grainy We'll write grainy for this one, that's another word. Feels grainy. And it sticks to my hand. Okay? So what did we learn about the jars? We learned that jar number 2 is sticky, right? Jar 2 is sticky. Do you have any guesses about which one yet is sugar and which one is salt? I think I have a guess, but I want to see if you can guess first. So I'm going to guess that jar number 2 is the sugar because it's sticky and sugar can be sticky. So I'm going to guess that jar 2 is sugar. Now, we have one of our 5 senses left. Okay? So let's see, now we get to taste it. So we're gonna take a little bit from jar number 1. Okay? And you're gonna drop it in your mouth. Woo. And what do you think that jar is? Salty. So we're gonna put, it tastes salty. And then let's try jar number 2. So I'm gonna take a little bit, and you too, and you're gonna drop it on your tongue. And what about that one? Sweet, right? So we used our sense of taste. So one was salty and one was sweet. So which jar, let me get my jar. Which jar do you think is sugar and which do you think is salt? That's right. So jar number 2 is sugar. And jar 1 is salt. So we're going to circle where it says jar number 1. This one is salt. And jar number 2 is sugar. Okay. So which of our 5 senses helped us figure out which jar was sugar and which jar was salt? That's right, our sense of taste helped us the most. And then probably our sense of touch, right? But our sense of sight didn't help too much because they were the same. They were both white, powdery, and small grains. Our sense of smell maybe would have helped us out a little bit, right? But our sense of taste helped us the most. So we hope you enjoyed this activity, and you can try this with other things at home too. You could do a taste test using different foods, different fruits, different vegetables, different clear drinks like water, regular water, seltzer water. You could try water with some lemon and try to figure out which cup has which kind of water in it. And you can do the same thing: sight, smell, hearing, touch, taste.